There is a very specific kind of silence that settles into a house when it holds too much space and too little life. For the past 240 days, that silence has been my only companion. My name is Eleanor Vance. I spent 32 years on the civil court bench in the state of New York, listening to broken contracts, fractured promises, and the quiet wreckage of human relationships. I thought I knew every shade of deception a human heart could manufacture, but nothing in a courtroom ever prepared me for the systematic, calculated erasure of a grandmother from her own flesh and blood. I sat in my study in Westchester, looking up at the large wall calendar hanging by the mahogany bookshelf. August 15th was circled in thick, aggressive red marker, a complete, unbroken ring. It was Chloe's 6th birthday, my only grandchild. 8 months, 240 agonizing days since I had last held her small, warm hands or smelled the scent of strawberry shampoo in her fine blonde hair. To the outside world, it looked like a natural fading away. Children grow up, they build their own lives, and parents step back. That is the rhythm of life, or so I told myself during the long, sleepless nights. But this was no natural drift. This was a siege. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly, orchestrated with surgical precision by my daughter-in-law, Vanessa. First, it was piano lessons on Saturdays, then speech therapy on Tuesday afternoons. Soon, phone calls to my son Marcus began to ring out into empty voicemail boxes. When he did answer, his voice was tight, hurried, hollowed out by excuses. Vanessa had convinced him, drop by drop, that my presence was toxic, that my experience as a judge made me too critical, too overbearing, too dangerous to have around a growing child. Marcus, my brilliant son, a senior software engineer who could debug millions of lines of complex code, could not debug the simple, venomous manipulation happening right inside his own home. He simply surrendered to peace, trading his mother for a quiet house. And yet, none of them truly understood the architecture of the ground they were standing on. People in Westchester look at the grand colonial-style estate where Marcus and Vanessa live and assume it is the fruit of a tech executive's booming career. They see the sprawling 4 acres of manicured lawn, the wraparound porch, and the stately brick chimneys, and they admire the young family's success. They do not know the registry of deeds. Back in 2018, when Marcus and Vanessa first married and spoke of wanting a safe haven to raise a family, I didn't just give them a blessing. I used every cent of my judicial pension and lifetime savings to buy that estate outright in cash. I established the Vance Family Living Trust, with myself as the sole trustee. Marcus and Vanessa did not hold a mortgage with a bank. They held a permissive occupancy agreement directly with the trust. The legal terms were clear, binding, and quietly filed away in a secure vault. They were permitted to reside on the property indefinitely, rent-free, provided they maintained the grounds, honored family integrity, and raised their children in a healthy, safe, and uncorrupted environment. They were tenants of my foresight. They were living inside a fortress built entirely by my hands, completely oblivious to the fact that the walls belonged to me. For weeks, I poured all my remaining hope into preparing a single, irreplaceable gift. I opened the velvet-lined mahogany box sitting on my desk and lifted out a delicate white gold locket. Inside was a tiny, microscopic engraving of a photograph, my late husband, Arthur, smiling the day he was appointed to the appellate division, alongside a miniature portrait of myself. It was an heirloom of survival, of a love that had weathered real storms. Beside it, I placed a small leather-bound journal filled with handwritten letters for every birthday Chloe would ever have, up until she turned 18. I walked over to my wardrobe and carefully unzipped a garment bag. I slipped into a soft, pastel blue silk dress, the exact shade Chloe had pointed to a year ago, looking up at me with her wide, innocent eyes and whispering, "Grandma, you look like a summer sky." I slid my feet into polished leather loafers, walked out the front door, and locked it behind me. The morning sun hung in a brilliant, cloudless New York sky, the kind of deceptive blue that makes you believe the world is entirely at peace. I stepped into my black luxury sedan, started the ignition, and drove toward Hemlock Lane. I was not going there to beg for scraps of time with my granddaughter. I was going there to reclaim the light of my life. The drive down Hemlock Lane took 20 minutes, but each mile felt heavy, as if I were carrying the weight of 8 obliterated months in the passenger seat. When my sedan finally rolled up to the curb, the estate hummed with synthetic perfection. Colorful, oversized balloons twisted around the wrought iron gates like bright, mocking snakes, and a massive vinyl banner stretched across the wraparound porch announced Chloe's 6th birthday in shimmering gold lettering. There were easily 150 people scattered across the sprawling, manicured green lawns. It was the kind of lavish, stage-managed spectacle Vanessa lived for. An endless parade of corporate colleagues, wealthy neighbors, and high society acquaintances holding crystal glasses of champagne, laughing at jokes that lacked warmth. Vanessa cared about one thing above all else in this life: optics. Everything had to look like a glossy page from a lifestyle magazine, perfectly curated to hide whatever rot, deceit, or emotional starvation lay underneath the surface. To her, a child's birthday wasn't a celebration of life, it was a public relations campaign. I parked the car, took a slow, steadying breath, and stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. The air smelled of freshly mowed grass, expensive perfume, and barbecued meats. I adjusted my handbag, straightened the lapel of my silk jacket, and walked up the paved driveway. My eyes scanned the crowd immediately, looking for a familiar face, looking for my son. I found Marcus standing near the patio bar, talking with a group of corporate partners dressed in immaculate tailored suits. From a distance, he looked like a successful man who had it all, but I knew him better than anyone. I knew the subtle language of his posture. His shoulders were rigidly pinned back, his jaw was clenched, and his eyes kept darting nervously toward the front entrance, twitching like a man waiting for a bomb to detonate at any second. He knew I had the invitation, he knew I was coming, and the quiet dread of the inevitable collision between his overbearing wife and his estranged mother was already eating holes through his spine. He was trapped in a war he didn't have the courage to stop. Then, the noise of the party faded, and the world shifted entirely. My gaze cut past the chattering crowd, past the clusters of silver-trimmed tables, toward the bouncy castle set up near the edge of the tall garden hedge. And there she was, my little sunshine. Chloe was wearing a pale pink princess dress with a matching white ribbon tied neatly in her long blonde hair. She was laughing, that bright, musical laugh that used to fill my empty kitchen on rainy afternoons. She was chasing a little boy across the lawn, her little pink legs pumping with pure, unfiltered joy, completely untouched by the poison circulating among the adults. She turned her head to change direction, and her eyes caught mine standing by the edge of the driveway. Her steps stuttered. Her eyes went wide, growing as round as saucers. "Grandma!" The word pierced clean through the low murmurs of the party, clear and sharp as a silver bell. In that single electric second, everything else ceased to exist.
She abandoned her game, her face breaking into a radiant, unguarded smile of absolute, unconditional love. She started running straight towards me across the grass, her arms outstretched, her little pink dress billowing behind her like a falling cloud. 8 months of agonizing isolation, blocked phone calls, hollow excuses, and forced silence evaporated in a single heartbeat. My heart swelled, aching with a love so fierce it nearly knocked the breath straight from my lungs. All the pain of the past 240 days melted away, replaced by the warmth of her approach. I dropped my handbag, opened my arms wide, and leaned forward to catch my granddaughter, to finally pull my world back into my embrace. And then, pure violence tore through the bright afternoon air. Just as Chloe was mere feet away, closing the final distance between us, a dark shadow lunged from behind my blind spot like a cornered wild animal. Before my brain could even register the motion or calculate the trajectory, a heavy, vicious shove slammed squarely into my back. "Get away from her, you manipulative old witch!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice warped by pure, unadulterated panic and hatred. The force of the attack was completely uncalculated for. My elderly footing gave way instantly against the stone. My body lurched violently forward, my glasses flying off my face as I crashed hard against a sturdy aluminum patio chair. The impact knocked the wind from my chest, sending a sharp, sickening jolt shoot up my spine. My purse and the velvet gift box slipped from my grip, clattering loudly and uselessly against the hard stone pavers. Instantly, the ambient chatter of the party suffocated, dying a swift, unnatural death. 150 pairs of eyes snapped towards our direction, locking into a frozen, dead silence. The upbeat music playing from the outdoor speakers cut out mid-note. The laughter vanished into thin air, and slicing straight through the horrific, suffocating vacuum came Chloe's terrified, piercing scream, echoing like a siren. "Grandma!" As I lay there on the cold stone, staring up at the blur of pale, shocked faces, I realized the trap had finally snapped shut.
As I lay there against the cold aluminum of the patio chair, the grass smelling sharply of summer mud and crushed clover, I did not cry. 32 years sitting on the civil court bench of New York teach you one absolute truth. When someone tries to break you with raw, uncontrolled aggression, the most dangerous thing you can do is give them the satisfaction of panic. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind cleared with the cold precision of a winter morning. In a courtroom, the side that loses its temper first has already lost the case. Vanessa wanted a scene. She wanted a screaming match, a public spectacle where she could paint me as the unhinged, unwanted intruder. She wanted mud, and she wanted me to roll in it. I had no intention of obliging her. My first and only priority in that suffocating vacuum wasn't my bruised spine. It was the little girl standing frozen in the eye of this storm. Across the lawn, Chloe was no longer running. She was trapped in the middle of the grass, her small hands clamped over her mouth, tears streaming uncontrollably down her cheeks as her mother's venom echoed off the brick walls of the house. I didn't need to shout. I simply turned my head slightly, locking eyes with Sarah, my oldest, most trusted friend, who had accompanied me and stood quietly near the fringe of the crowd. A single, weighted look passed between us. Sarah understood instantly. Before Vanessa could draw her next breath to shriek another insult, Sarah moved with quiet, decisive grace. She bypassed the paralyzed onlookers, scooped the trembling, sobbing Chloe up into our arms, and turned away from the crowd. She carried my granddaughter through the French doors into the quiet safety of the main house, slipping away before the child could witness any more of the ugliness. Safe inside, away from the noise, with cartoons playing on the television and the velvet-lined gift box resting safely in her small hands, Chloe's world was shielded. That was the first battle won. Now I had to deal with the theater playing out in the open. Vanessa stood towering over me, her hands planted firmly on her hips. Her face was drained of color, pale beneath her heavy makeup, betraying the sudden, frantic terror gnawing at her insides. But she covered it with the only weapon she had left, unadulterated, screaming aggression. She was playing to the gallery now, spinning a narrative for the 150 witnesses who stood frozen around us like statues. "Look at her! Just look at this unhinged woman!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking with high-pitched hysteria as she gestured wildly toward me. "She's a trespasser! She wasn't even invited! She showed up here just to ruin my daughter's birthday out of spite! Someone call the police right now and throw this lunatic off my property!" The word hung in the humid afternoon air. My property. A ripple of uneasy murmurs passed through the clusters of corporate guests and neighbors. They hadn't seen the shove clearly from every angle, but they had seen an elderly woman knocked to the ground by a frantic, screaming hostess. But Vanessa's performance was desperate, designed to drown out the memory of her own violence with noise and accusations. Then, cutting through the murmurs, came the rapid, frantic crunch of footsteps on gravel. Marcus broke through the circle of onlookers. He looked as though he had just seen a ghost. His tailored suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie slightly crooked, and every drop of blood had vanished from his face. He looked back and forth between his wife, who was breathing heavily, her chest heaving with adrenaline, and me, still down on the grass. He was completely paralyzed, caught in the unbearable tension of a man whose two worlds had violently collided. He dropped down beside me, his hands hovering uselessly in the air, his voice trembling and thin. Mom, what are you doing here?" Marcus stammered, his eyes nervously darting toward the crowd. "Why didn't you call first? You can't just— This is a disaster." He was still making excuses for her. Even now, kneeling beside his mother on the dirt, his instinct was to manage the optics, to smooth over the jagged edges of Vanessa's temper. He was drowning in the web he had allowed her to spin over the last 8 months, too weak to pull himself out. I looked at my son, my only child, and felt a profound, aching sorrow, but there was no room for pity on the battlefield. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my palms flat against the cool stone pavers and pushed myself up. I didn't rush, I didn't let anyone help me. I stood to my full height, straightened the lapels of my pastel blue silk jacket, and reached down to brush a single blade of grass from my skirt. My posture was rigid, unbroken, carrying the unyielding weight of decades of authority. The entire garden held its breath. The silence was absolute. I looked past my son, fixing my steady, unblinking gaze directly onto Vanessa's dilated, panicked eyes. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise in pitch. It dropped into that low, resonant register I used to quiet a chaotic courtroom, a tone that commanded absolute attention without ever needing to shout. "Because this is my house, Marcus, and it is time I took back my keys." For a brief, suspended second, the sprawling garden was so dead silent you could hear the distant, steady hum of traffic on the main road. Then Vanessa's high-pitched, hysterical laugh cut through the stillness like shattered glass. She scrambled back to her feet, brushing off her designer apron with trembling hands, her face twisted into an ugly, desperate sneer of absolute mockery. "What is this senile, bitter old woman rambling about?" Vanessa scoffed loudly, turning her head frantically toward the cluster of stunned, whispering guests to salvage her pride. "This house is ours. We took out a massive bank mortgage, and we pay our heavy monthly installments just like everyone else. This is our home, not hers. She's making up fairy tales." She thought she had covered all her tracks. She thought she and Marcus had built a secure fortress of paper debt and corporate illusions. But I didn't waste a single breath arguing with her in the dirt. In a courtroom, you never engage in a shouting match with a cornered liar. You simply present the indisputable record that leaves them nowhere to run. Slowly, without a single hint of tremor in my fingers, I reached into the pocket of my silk jacket, pulled out my smartphone, and tapped a pre-saved, heavily encrypted contact. The call connected on the very first ring. I didn't waste time on pleasantries, greetings, or emotional explanations. I spoke into the speaker with absolute, unyielding calm, every word deliberate. "Arthur, bring the original files of the Vance Family Living Trust and the formal notice of revocation of occupancy to Hemlock Lane right now." I hung up immediately, cutting the connection before he could even reply. 12 minutes. That was all the time it took. True power doesn't scream or flail. It arrives precisely on schedule. An Obsidian executive town car turned smoothly off the main road, gliding up the paved driveway with quiet elegance before coming to a dead stop right beside the patio. The door clicked open, and Arthur Sterling stepped out. He was 70 years old, my longtime trusted friend and the senior legal counsel of the trust, a man whose silver hair, immaculate charcoal suit, and sharp, calculating eyes commanded instant authority wherever he went. He didn't look like a wedding guest or a party attendee. He looked like an executioner in tailoring, carrying the final judgment. He bent down, carefully scooped up my velvet gift box and leather handbag from the stone pavers where Vanessa's violence had sent them flying, and handed them back to me with a respectful, steady nod. Then he straightened up, turned away from me, and walked deliberately through the center of the lawn. 150 high society guests, corporate colleagues, and wealthy neighbors stood completely frozen in place, their champagne glasses hovering midair, watching a top-tier corporate attorney march straight into a middle of a child's birthday party carrying a thick, heavy leather briefcase. Arthur stopped right beside me, standing shoulder to shoulder with the woman Vanessa had just tried to throw into the dirt. He unlatched the heavy brass locks of the briefcase with a sharp, echoing snap, pulled out a thick stack of heavily stamped, official, notarized legal documents, and looked directly out over the silent, staring crowd. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," Arthur announced, his tone utterly devoid of warmth or hesitation. "My name is Arthur Sterling, legal counsel for the Vance Family Living Trust. Let me make this legally absolute for every single person present today. This estate does not belong to Marcus Vance, and it certainly does not belong to Vanessa Vance. Title ownership has rested solely with the Family Living Trust, established independently by Judge Eleanor Vance back in 2018. Mr. and Mrs. Vance hold no bank deed, no equity, and no permanent title to these 4 acres. They were merely granted a permissive occupancy agreement under strict, binding conditions of family integrity, safety, and mutual respect. A heavy, suffocating wave of collective shock rippled through the clusters of guests. Low, nervous whispers broke out among the neighbors, but Arthur raised a single finger, silencing the entire garden instantly. "Due to a severe, documented and intentional violation of the moral and ethical conduct clauses, compounded by a direct act of physical violence committed against the trustee herself within these very grounds, the occupancy agreement is hereby formally revoked. The legal right to reside on this property is terminated, null and void, effective immediately. The words dropped like falling blocks of steel into a bottomless well. Vanessa's knees gave out completely. All the fire, all the venom, all the frantic, screaming arrogance drained from her body in a single, agonizing second. Her face turned the pale color of ash beneath her heavy makeup. She staggered backward, her expensive designer heels catching awkwardly on the green grass before collapsing hard onto the manicured turf. She didn't scream anymore. She didn't threaten to call the police. She sat there in the dirt, staring blankly at the stone pavers, finally realizing the terrifying, inescapable truth that she and her husband did not own a single inch of the ground they stood on. They were completely, legally, and utterly dispossessed. The low, nervous murmurs of 150 high society guests began to weave through the manicured garden like a rising tide. Whispers of judgment, sudden shock, and undisguised contempt shifted the atmosphere entirely, locking onto the woman who had spent years constructing a polished, flawless illusion. Vanessa knew instantly that she had lost the legal war. The ground beneath her designer shoes had dissolved into dust, and her public relations mask was completely shattered beyond repair. Instead of accepting the inevitable with even a shred of dignity, her survival instinct twisted into frantic, unhinged desperation. She scrambled up from the grass, her face flushed dark with humiliation, and whirled around to point a shaking, accusatory finger straight at her husband. "Marcus, are you just going to stand there like a paralyzed coward and watch your mother humiliate your wife and child?" Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking with high-pitched, hysterical panic as she tried to force him into the trenches. "Tell them to get off our property right this instant." She was trying to drag him down into her wreckage, demanding the blind loyalty she had never truly earned or deserved. But I did not raise my voice to match her screaming. In 32 years sitting on the civil court bench, I learned a fundamental truth. The most lethal blows are never struck with noise. They are delivered with cold, unyielding precision and absolute facts. I did not pull out a projector or flash a digital screen before the eyes of the 150 guests, nor did I expose the sordid details in front of the neighborhood children. There was an innocent little girl safely locked away behind closed doors inside the house, and I refused to let the toxic ugliness of adult betrayal stain her world any further. Instead, I walked deliberately across the stone pavers until I stood directly in front of my son. Marcus was trembling from head to toe, looking like a man caught in the epicenter of a collapsing mountain. I reached into my handbag, pulled out a small, sleek black USB drive and a neatly bound stack of printed investigation reports, and pressed them firmly into his shaken hands. I looked straight into his wide, terrified eyes, not with bitter anger, but with a heavy, sorrowful firmness that cut right through his psychological paralysis. "Son, I am not here to air dirty laundry in public or humiliate you in front of your colleagues," I said, my voice low and steady, carrying only to his ears. "But you need to read every single page of this. You need to see what the woman you've been fiercely defending, the one who kept you isolated and blocked me from seeing my granddaughter for 240 agonizing days, has actually been doing behind your back while you were locked away working long overtime hours at the office." Marcus stared down at the documents in his hands as if they were burning hot coals. His breath hitched sharply in his throat. With agonizingly slow, trembling fingers, he lifted the cover of the folder. The first page was not legal jargon. It was a series of explicit bank statements detailing heavy wire transfers from their shared accounts to luxury boutique hotels, weekend getaways, and extravagant purchases he knew nothing about. Behind them were high-resolution photographs captured by a professional private investigator, crystal clear, undeniable images stamped with dates falling on consecutive Tuesday afternoons. They showed Vanessa locked in intimate, affectionate embraces with a handsome, unfamiliar man right inside our family home, lounging comfortably on the very living room sofa I had purchased for them. Tuesday afternoons, every single week, while Marcus sat at his corporate desk debugging complex software, believing he was sacrificing his time to build a secure, prosperous future for his family, his wife was systematically dismantling it under our roof, turning our family sanctuary into a stage for her deceit. The comforting illusion dissolved in a single brutal second. The world Marcus had fought so hard to protect, the walls of compliance he had alienated his own mother to maintain, collapsed inward and crushed him completely. All the blind justification, all the obedient defense evaporated into an overwhelming tide of humiliation, betrayal, and scorching emotional pain. His knees buckled entirely beneath the weight of the realization. He dropped hard onto the gravel driveway, clutching his head in his hands, absolutely shattered, unable to utter a single word. When Vanessa saw that her husband had collapsed into a broken ruin on the gravel and would no longer stand as her shield or accomplice, the mask of polished composure shattered entirely. Her face twisted into an ugly mask of pure, unadulterated fury, and she lunged forward like a cornered animal, her manicured fingers clawing out as she tried to physically tear into Marcus where he sat. "You useless, spineless coward!" Vanessa shrieked, raining wild blows towards his head as he stared blankly at the ground. Before she could land a destructive strike, 2 private security guards deployed by the trust stepped in with quiet, practiced efficiency, firmly holding her back and establishing a safe, unbreachable barrier between her violent rage and my son. Arthur Sterling did not flinch. With the cold, methodical composure of a seasoned veteran of civil law, he reached into his briefcase, pulled out an official, heavy-stock document stamped with the trust's seal, and stepped directly in front of her path. He held it out so she had no choice but to confront the stark black and white headings. "Here is your formal notice to vacate, Mrs. Vance," Arthur announced, his voice ringing crisp and authoritative across the silent garden. "You and all personal belongings must be completely cleared from this estate within exactly 30 days. Furthermore, be advised that any attempt to strip, damage, or transfer marital assets or household fixtures from this property during your departure will be met with immediate criminal prosecution and asset freezing." The harsh, undeniable reality of total destruction finally set in. One by one, the 150 high society guests and corporate colleagues averted their eyes, turning their backs in profound, silent disgust. They slipped away toward their luxury cars without a single word of farewell, leaving behind a lavish birthday party that had transformed into a smoking crater of lies, deceit, and moral bankruptcy. Stripped of her social standing, her stolen security, and her elaborate illusions, she had nothing left. She had to drag her own heavy suitcases across the asphalt, loading them into the trunk of a friend's car under a barrage of icy, condemning stares from the neighbors who had once flattered her. She was entirely, irrevocably ruined. She had lost the house, lost her social mask, and lost her family in a single catastrophic afternoon. Later that evening, as the afternoon shadows lengthened across Westchester and the chaotic noise of the day finally dissolved into a deep, profound quiet, I stepped through the French doors and walked back inside the house. The main living room was warm, softly lit, and peaceful. Chloe was sitting on the plush rug near the brick fireplace, quietly stacking wooden building blocks with Sarah, completely insulated from the storm that had raged outside. When the little girl looked up and saw me standing by the doorway, her face lit up with that familiar, radiant sunshine. She abandoned her toys, scrambled across the floor, and threw her small arms tightly around my knees, burying her face against the folds of my dress. I knelt down carefully, dropping my handbag to the floor, and pulled my granddaughter into a fierce, unconditional embrace. I breathed in the sweet, comforting scent of strawberry shampoo in her hair, feeling the heavy ache in my chest finally begin to mend. I rested my chin gently against her head and whispered softly, "Everything is okay now, my sweet girl. Grandma is here, and no one will ever be allowed to frighten you again." A few moments later, the heavy sound of dragging footsteps echoed from the hallway. Marcus walked slowly into the living room. His face was pale, his eyes hollowed by shock and despair, carrying the crushing burden of a man whose entire life had been detonated by his own blind compliance. He stopped a few feet away, looked down at the polished floor, and slowly lowered himself onto his knees before me. The silence in the room stretched, thick and suffocating, loaded with the weight of 8 months of isolation and devastating betrayal. He didn't offer empty excuses. He didn't try to shift the blame on anyone else. He just bowed his head, his voice cracking into a broken, tear-choked whisper. "I'm sorry, Mom." I looked down at my only son, feeling the deep, scarring grooves of a mother's grief. I did not scold him, and I did not pour salt into his open wounds. I knew too well that life's most brutal lessons are sometimes only learned when the heart is shattered into pieces. Slowly, deliberately, I reached out my hand and rested my palm gently on his bowed head, offering the quiet grace of forgiveness as the sun set.
5 long years. Time has a remarkable, unhurried way of filtering out the toxic noise, dissolving the artificial drama, and leaving only the bedrock truth standing proudly in the light of day. Today, the Westchester estate looks entirely different from that chaotic, shattering afternoon 5 years ago. The air is no longer heavy with artificial tension, forced smiles, or polished deception. It breathes with a quiet, grounding, and unbreakable peace. Chloe is 11 years old now, a bright, confident, remarkably resilient young girl who laughs easily, runs freely across the green lawn, and moves through the world with a steady, unshakable grace that makes my heart ache with quiet pride every single day. In the immediate wake of that disastrous birthday, the legal fallout was swift, absolute, and merciless. Vanessa attempted to file multiple frivolous lawsuits demanding a substantial share of the family assets, but she ran headfirst into the impenetrable, rock-solid iron wall of the Vance family living trust and Arthur's airtight documentation. With no legal grounds, no equity, and no financial foothold left, her desperate challenges were dismissed by the courts one by one. Left with nothing of the social illusion she had spent years trying to buy, she packed up the remainder of her life, relocated to a distant state, and vanished completely from our lives, leaving not even a ripple behind in the community that once fawned over her. Marcus took the hardest, loneliest path of all, but he walked it with genuine accountability. Following the legal collapse of his marriage, he quietly moved into a modest apartment nearby and entered intensive, long-term psychological therapy. He did not run away from his profound mistakes or hide behind excuses. He faced them head-on. Over the years, he rebuilt his professional footing step by step, and more importantly, he did the slow, painful work required to heal a fractured bond with his daughter and earn back my trust as a mother. He is a truly changed man today, present, sober, humble, and completely devoted to her daughter's happiness and future. And now, on this bright afternoon marking Chloe's 11th birthday, the circle of our lives closed in the most breathtaking, healing way imaginable. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, amber glow across the manicured lawn as the two of us knelt side by side along the white wooden fence of the garden. Together, we pressed fresh sunflower seeds deep into the rich, damp earth, recreating stem by stem the exact bright yellow landscape she had drawn on a piece of paper when she was only 5 years old, a masterpiece of survival and innocence restored. Around her neck, catching the brilliant afternoon light, rested the delicate white gold locket holding the photograph of her great-grandfather, a symbol that the past no longer haunted us, but protected us like an ancient shield against any future darkness. She paused for a moment, pressing dirt gently around a fragile seedling with her small hands, and looked up at me with clear, observant eyes that understood far more than her years should ever require. "Grandma, why were you so calm back then when everyone was screaming and trying to break our family?" Chloe asked, softly, her voice carrying the quiet depth of a child who had watched the storm pass and seen the wreckage clear. I smiled, looking out past the garden towards the vast, clear blue sky stretching endlessly across the horizon. I reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead, and gave her the final, enduring truth of our journey. Because, my love, the truest form of strength is never found in shouting or blind anger. When someone tries to push you down, you don't fight them in the mud. You simply stand up, brush the dust from your shoulders, and prove to them that the foundation you stand upon, built with absolute truth, wisdom, and dignity, can never, ever be destroyed. Chloe smiled an understanding, radiant smile that reflected all the sunlight in the world. She dropped her garden trowel, wrapped her small arms tightly around my neck, and pulled me close in a fierce, unbreakable embrace. Looking out at the horizon, I knew the storm had finally passed for good. The roots we planted today would anchor us through whatever tomorrow might bring, and our home was once again a true sanctuary of love and light. Together, holding each other in the golden warmth of the fading evening light, we watched the tiny green shoots begin their long, patient journey towards the sun, knowing that justice and peace had finally won. Every single scar we carried transformed into a badge of survival, reminding us that no matter how dark the night, truth will always find its way into the light.
Before we say goodbye, I want to talk to you for just a moment. Wherever you are right now, what city are you sitting in, and what time is it on your clock as you watch this? Let me know in the comments below so I can see just how far this story traveled to reach you. More importantly, looking at this story, what is the biggest lesson you are taking away today? Is it about the strength to stand back up when everything is stripped away, the courage to walk away from toxic bonds, or the realization that human dignity and self-respect can never be bought with a price tag? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I would love to know how this resonated with you. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for watching. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video.